So this is going to be Geometry 2A. We're going to start off by looking at just a quick review of what slope is and talk about how we compare slope to know whether or not two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So to start off, we have our slope formula that you should remember from the quiz we just took. So the difference in our difference in our y's over the difference in our x's, okay? So before we get started, parallel, the definition, you're probably familiar. It just means two or more lines with the same slope that never touch. So again, two or more lines with the same slope that never touch. And perpendicular, it just means two or more lines that intersect at 90-degree angles. So again, parallel, two or more lines with the same slope that never touch, and perpendicular, two or more lines that intersect at 90 degrees. So the symbols that we use for those, for parallel, so when you see us write them in geometry, it's just two L's standing up for parallel, signifying they never touch side by side, and perpendicular, just like that, upside down T. Sometimes they'll have a little rectangle there to indicate that it's 90 degrees. But when you see us write it in shorthand from now on, if you see me write parallel, perpendicular, most of the time, what you'll see is these two symbols. So, some facts about parallel lines. So again, parallel lines, they have the same slope. So what that means, if I have a slope of line AB, write that differently, and I know that CD is parallel, that means that the slope of CD has to be equal to the same thing, okay? Now for perpendicular, which is the actual interesting one. So perpendicular lines have slopes that are inverse reciprocal. So that means if a slope of AB is equal to 4, if I know that CD is perpendicular, then that means that the slope of CD is negative 1/4. So the reciprocal, basically the way to think about it is we turn this upside down and put an opposite sign on it. So then the reciprocal let's say 2/3. So the reciprocal of 2/3 is negative 3/2. The reciprocal of negative 1/2 is positive 2/1, or just 2. Okay? That's just the way it works. So then, again, just to recap, parallel has the same slope, perpendicular has reciprocal inverse, or inverse reciprocal. One big thing to look out for is on the exam, what they like to do is to ask you the slope of the reciprocal line and they'll say something like, hey, my slope is 4/5, and then give you the answers -5/4, 5/4, and then something off like 3. So what people do is they tend to forget that it's the inverse reciprocal, and they end up choosing this one. So remember, inverse reciprocal means that we change the sign and turn it upside down. Make sure not to make that mistake. Change your sign and turn the fraction upside down. So, in a brief recap too of Algebra 1, when we see the slope, it won't just be a statement of here's the slope. Most of the time, it will be a statement given to us in an equation. So, we have two forms that takes. We have the point slope formula, and we also have the slope intercept. Okay, so point slope essentially looks like this. Where M is our slope, and x1 and y1 is a given point. Meaning they just tell us some point and some slope, and they write the equation. For our slope-intercept form, we have what probably you're most familiar with, y equals mx plus b, where again, we have m as our slope, and b is our y-intercept. The y-intercept, in case you don't remember, write the definition down. Y-intercept is just where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay? So that's all that is. The big thing to remember is that when we see an equation, what we want to look for is that the coefficient of x. So let's say we have an equation so something that's in point slope formula. So we have these y's and the x's. So to find out, we're going to multiply this 3 all the way through. And what we see is that our slope is 3. So what that means is the slope of a parallel line is going to equal 3. The slope of a line that's perpendicular, -1/3. Again, turn this upside down and make it opposite. So what we're looking for when we have an equation is we're looking for the coefficient of x, coefficient being that big number in front of the x variable. When we see something like this, just make sure to distribute all the way through. Otherwise, just take our coefficient and we're good.